With great power comes great responsibility, and you have the power to sign up for extratug.com for exclusive perks and videos. Check it out. Am I still upside down, Chris? Please put me back up normal. My head's getting big. I love the Beatles. Who doesn't love the Beatles? You kind of a if you don't love the Beatles. If you have a soul and a beating heart, you like one of their songs at least. The Beatles are one of the few rock bands whose careers practically define an entire era in history. Even though they were only an active group for 10 years, the lads from Liverpool created a legacy so massive that they're in history textbooks. The band occupies a rare level of fame with other musicians like Elvis, Michael Jackson, and Taylor Swift. People are gonna get mad at me for that Taylor Swift thing, but it's true. I mean, goddamn, she's the biggest person. She is. But the Beatles stand out among those artists as the only ones that have a well-defined and carefully curated moral compass. They help define the hippie ethos, baby. Peace and love, putting flowers into guns and whatever. I mean, just look at their song titles. Love Me Do, She Loves You, Can't Buy Me Love, and I Love Her, It's Only Love, P.S. I Love You, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, All My Loving, All You Need Is Love. John Lennon was even on the very first cover of Rolling Stone magazine, which became the paper of record for the counterculture during the Vietnam War. As a child, that confused me, because how does the Rolling Stones not get the first cover of Rolling Stone magazine? I thought the Rolling Stones owned Rolling Stone magazine until I was like 20, to be completely honest. Even over a half century since their breakup, the Beatles remain popular with younger generations. Spotify data from 2019 revealed that 47% of the band's billion-plus streams came from listeners under 30. It seems even newer generations find their way to loving the Beatles and loving their overly curated image. But that image, a little wonky. Ultimately, are we being sold the truth, or are we being sold a bunch of hogwash? Tug, let's get ready to take the long and winding road through strawberry fields as we set out to find the dark side of the Beatles. It's a bit of a corny title, but it's worth talking about. But first, let's do an ad! Hey, are you 21 years or older? Well, it's the future now, so we don't gotta hide the fact that we like to get a little bit lit. And thanks to the good people over at 5CBD, it's never been easier or more convenient or better to get a little bit relaxed on your own money and time. 5 is introducing the new Quick Hit Gummies, a 15 milligram fast-acting edible that makes you say out loud, that hit fast, good lord. Conveniently delivered right to your door, third-party tested, and with consistent strength, you won't be left guessing why you can't stop eating. I get the munchies to a very bad degree. Any food delivery app is a sin in my book because, oh my god, I can't stop using them at the hour of 12. They use a little thing called nano emulsion, so it kicks in quicker and feels even, which is great for me because I don't like waiting around for 2 hours for one of these bad boys to kick, and then when it hits, you're like, my god, like I like the even grow. And also, they got a 30-day money-back guarantee, so very little risk when it comes to trying out new things here. Also, I don't have the product on me, but I had the product on me last time I did one of these ads, and that means that product is gone. Because I done ate them all. So if you want to try 5's fast-acting eddies, you're in luck. If you're 21 years or older, use my link and pay for shipping, you get a free jar. Oh my god, could you believe it? Thank you to 5 for sponsoring this video and making most of my weekday nights pretty enjoyable. Okay, so let's start with what I assume to be the least problematic Beatle of all time, Ringo Starr. In the annals of rock history, there are only a handful of drummers who have become household names. You have John Bonham, Led Zeppelin's drummer, who died choking on his own vomit. Tragically, things happen. And then Keith Moon, the Who's drummer, who died by overdosing on a drug that was supposed to help his alcohol withdrawals. And Travis Barker. Travis Barker is barely Blink-182's drummer anymore. He just does whatever the he wants. But that's it. Bonham, Moon, Barker, and Ringo. The only drummers to ever exist. Oh, and what's his name? How can I not remember this? He had a baby with not his wife. He was in Nirvana. Foo Fighters. Chris, help me out here.
Ladies and gentlemen,
But regardless, almost all drummers tend to get the short end of the stick, and Ringo is no exception. In 2022 survey, only 11% of US adults picked Ringo as their favorite member of the Beatles. When you think about it, he just doesn't have as much legacy as the other dudes. Ringo only wrote 2 Beatles songs on his own, and one of them is Octopus Garden, which, I'll admit, underrated banger, can't play it here. Obviously, I think I would get shot in the head if I played Beatles music in this video, but it's pretty lightweight when considering Beatles tunes like While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Across the Universe, and Hey Jude. Which makes this 2008 video of him demanding his fans stop sending him fan mail outrageously hilarious.
This is a serious message to everybody watching my update right now. After the 20th of October, do not send fan mail to any address that you have. Nothing will be signed after the 20th of October. Anyway, peace and love, peace and love.
Ringo, calm down a little bit. I think we should all agree that you're a little lucky that you're getting fan mail at all. Peace and love, brother. But despite his lack of popularity when it compared to the rest of the Fab Four, Ringo was still a member of one of the most famous bands of all time. So I'm sure he got caught up in some low-stakes shenanigans along the way. Let's find out. Let's start at the end of Ringo's career, also known as the beginning of his solo career. Yeah, Ringo cut a few solo records. And they sound like dog shit. I don't know how else to say that. But the worst song of the lot is his cover of the song, You're 16, You're Beautiful, and You're Mine. Oof. Oof! Of course there's a long tradition of, quote, jailbait songs in the history of rock and roll. Honestly, it seems like every song from the 50s was about a teeny bopper vixen that a 32-year-old man was trying to court, and how much trouble they'd be in if daddy came in and saw you sticking her one in the barn. It's f***ing, I'm not even being light about this. Even the Beatles took part in this tradition with their song I Saw Her Standing There, which contains the lyric, well, she was just 17, if you know what I mean. Hey, what the f*** do you mean? But Ringo didn't write that one. In fact, he didn't write You're 16 either. The song was originally released in 1960 by rockabilly singer Johnny Burnett. And I know some of you are already triggered that I'm pointing this bullshit out and saying it's a different time in the comment sections or whatever. But it's not like Ringo actually means it. He's just paying homage to a dude no one's ever heard of. Well, if that's the case, how do you explain the music video? Let's take a gander. One where Ringo, who is at this point firmly in his 30s, is creeping on a teenager played by the Carrie Fisher. And not only that, he even kisses her several times. Poor Carrie. At one point, she's in a high school cheerleader uniform, and then Ringo takes her to the soda shop for a milkshake. What are you doing? You can't make this innocent by taking her to get a milkshake. You already kissed a teenager in a cheerleading costume, Ringo, you perv. Look, I'm not saying cancel Ringo. He seems like a perfectly decent weird old man rock star. And hell, I don't know. It feels like we can forgive him for this one. I mean, it's not like he's actually hurt anybody. Leading into the next part of the video, turns out Ringo was a crazy womanizer, and according to reports, he admitted to being a drunk, a wife beater, and an absent father. Okay, Ringo, you're supposed to ease us into things here, buddy. Now, it's weird, because I feel like I have to give a trigger warning here for domestic violence for a Beatle, but I think we're gonna come to find out that's not that uncommon. Just weird. I mean, a lot of their songs are about love, and they're just beating the shit out of women. I don't want to laugh. I'm not gonna laugh. That's not funny. I mean, it goes without saying that all of the Beatles were f***ing around on their wives. It was the 60s, and they were rock stars. I mean, it would have been weird if they weren't f***ing around on their wives, to be completely honest. And in some cases, the Beatles' wives were cheating on the Beatles too. Everyone was just f***ing around. But Ringo tied the knot to Maureen Starkey in 1965, and after 10 years of marriage, eventually the infidelity got the best of Maureen and she left. After Ringo's affair with model Nancy Lee Andrews. I'm a big fan of names from the 60s. They're very easy to pronounce. Ringo was in really bad shape around this time. After the Beatles broke up in 1970, he started hitting the bottle really, really hard. And once Maureen left, he was drinking a lot more beer. At his worst, he was drinking 16 bottles of wine a day and doing tons and tons of cocaine. Ringo even found himself in an underground celebrity drinking club called the Hollywood Vampires. The group was loosely formed by Alice Cooper, and for initiation, you had to outdrink the rest of the vampires. Other members at the time included Mark Bolan, John Belushi, and Keith Moon, you know, the super responsible guys who all died tragically. But eventually, Ringo got clean, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations, Ringo. But not after a night in the 80s where he almost killed his wife. Whoops, let's read about that. Ringo told the reporter, I came to one Friday, should I do the accent? I came to one Friday afternoon, I can't f it, and was told that the staff that I trashed the house so badly that they thought there had been burglars, and I trashed Barbara so badly they thought she was dead. Okay, maybe Ringo wasn't a Beatles star to begin with. I should have known. Every drummer I've met has been an insane person. Let's move on to George. Surely George Harrison won't be problematic. He was the spiritual one, for God's sake. While the Beatles were filming their 1965 movie Help, they met Swami Vishnudevananda, the founder of Sivanada Yoga, I think. He gave each band member a signed copy of the book, The Illustrated Book of Yoga. Wow, that's a move. Imagine assuming that the Beatles not only want a copy of your book, they also want it signed. These are the Beatles, you asshole. Harrison was interested, though. In fact, in the late 50s and 60s, America was experiencing a Zen boom, and many were becoming exposed to Eastern philosophy thanks to writers like Alan Watts, who in 1957 had a book called The Way of Zen, and it became a bestseller. Just years after being introduced to the concept of Zen, George was a vegetarian. He was studying Eastern philosophy and mysticism. He even traveled to India to study the sitar under virtuoso Ravi Shankar, which eventually led to the Beatles taking a much publicized trip to India in 1968 to study my God. Remember I just talked about how easy it is to talk about people in the 60s? Transcendental meditation. Thank you, Chris. Don't leave any of that in, I swear to God. The trip was cut short, however, after hearing rumors that their teacher, Marshayi Yogi, was allegedly trying to take advantage of his students. Later in life, several of his followers say they were coerced into having sex with him. Oh, and another fun fact, this guy, who I can't pronounce his name, who also gave Harrison a book about yoga, he would later be accused of sexually abusing at least 3 women. So I guess being spiritual doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person. Well, you can't really blame Harrison for the sins of other people. Lord knows practitioners of religion in the West are really f***ed up too. And for what it's worth, Harrison's spiritual beliefs are part of what makes his solo record, All Things Must Pass, an absolute best Beatles solo record. And low-key, it's not even close. That album makes me cry almost every time. Harrison was always at odds with John and Paul because he felt his songs were generally ignored by them. And the few George songs that did make the records are transcendent. Here Comes the Sun? That's like the Beatles song. But he still had an entire backlog of materials and creative energy that was unrealized. And his solo double album, All Things Must Pass, is proof that he was underutilized. Songs like My Sweet Lord? Oh my god, actually, one problem. He plagiarized that song. I didn't know that. My Sweet Lord was a global smash for Harrison, but it borrowed heavily from the melody of the song He's So Fine by the Chiffons. And after a few years in court, Harrison was found guilty of subconscious plagiarism. And I've been guilty of that before. I see a TikTok with a funny concept, I forget about it for 4 months, and then I make a TikTok, and everyone in the comments is like, you pulled off shit from this guy. And I'm like, damn it, I didn't mean to do that. And what else are you supposed to do as a spiritual guy besides writing a diss track? Well, sort of. His 1976 single, This Song, is a tongue-in-cheek assessment of the trial in musical copyrights. But it's George Harrison, so of course, the song is a fucking banger. It does seem like a rather petty move from a guy who is supposed to be super spiritual, but that's the thing about Harrison. More than he was spiritual, he was rich. Keep in mind, he's the one who wrote the song Taxman on the Beatles album Revolver, and the entire song is just talking shit about taxes. This man knew about money. Okay, so maybe old Georgie boy was fiscally conservative, but it wasn't just the tax code he had issues with, he also broke the sacred bro code. Remember how I said earlier Ringo's wife Maureen and Ringo were f***ing around on each other? George Harrison was involved. Harrison's ex-wife, Patty Boyd, said Harrison barely even tried to hide his infidelity with Maureen. Which, again, I guess was the whole hippie thing, not so much free love, more than rampant sucking and f***ing with little to no social consequences. According to Beatles lore, though, Harrison eventually came clean to Ringo by saying, quote, I'm in love with your wife, to which Ringo replied, better you than someone we don't know. That's a f***ing pat on the ass and a high five. I mean, that could have been a way worse situation, and Ringo's like, I don't give a f***. But I guess the Beatles were just freaks like that, and we gotta appreciate it. In Harrison's defense, he already knew that his wife and Eric Clapton had feelings for each other. Clapton was basically openly pursuing Patty, and even wrote one of the all-time greatest torch songs for her, 1970's Layla. Seriously, if you've never heard Layla, pause this video, go listen to it, change your life, come back. So basically, this circle of musicians was one big incestuous mess. But you know, even if it was a different time, I mean, leave Ringo out of it, George. This is between you, your wife, and Eric Clapton, a man whose nickname was Slow Hands. Some of that. Let's move on. Let's move on to Paul. Now, of course, Ringo and Harrison aren't the least problematic Beatles. That distinction would obviously go to Paul. Whoa, clothing change. Now, whatever. I don't have to explain anything. We're gonna keep talking. I mean, this guy's a total goober. Look at that sweet little face. That's Goob City. It's pretty easy to dunk on McCartney. He's made some really questionable decisions post-Beatles. Like the song Ebony and Ivory that he recorded with Stevie Wonder. Bold move, overall. Or the album Thrillington, which was just a big band re-recording of his solo album Ram, which Paul McCartney recorded under the pseudonym Percy Thrills Thrillington. Just all that. Just an unbelievable amount of people not saying no. Or maybe it was the several softball duets he recorded with Michael Jackson that clued us into the fact that Paul was just one gigantic cheese ball. I mean, I guess it makes sense. He was the bass player, after all. We all know a bass player. We all know what I'm talking about. And the fact that Paul McCartney became famous while slapping the funky bass is pretty incredible. I mean, legitimately, name one other bass player, except for Flea. I think that's it. I think that's the only one. But McCartney is pure melody. This guy is such a songwriting genius that it's not even the bass that could get in his way. And he's arguably the most successful Beatle post-breakup. A couple of them died pretty quickly, but still. I mean, not only did he score solo hits with amazing songs like Maybe I'm Amazed, but he fronted another rock band, Wings, which had 14 top 10 singles in the US. But Paul did get in trouble sometimes. I mean, he is the rock star, so it's bound to happen. But I guess the first incident does predate the fact that just Beatles getting famous overall. While the band was still young and struggling, they cut their teeth performing in Hamburg, Germany. They would usually stay above the clubs where they performed, and after their contracts were up, they had to move. But during one of these moves, Paul and the original Beatles drummer Pete Best found themselves looking for their stuff in a pitch dark room. So they did what any person would do. They put a condom on a nail and lit that on fire to be a source of light. There's like 10 things that went wrong with that thinking. Obviously, this is a bad idea, but the Beatles got lucky. The Flamin' Johnny only left a burn mark on the wall. However, the owners of the venue were pretty rightfully pissed. Almost arson happened, and they told police that the two tried to set fire to the building. Paul was detained overnight and then deported back to the UK. But that wasn't the only time Sir Paul would wind up in the slammer. He went to jail a bunch of times. He was actually held without bail for 9 days in Japan on drug charges. But it wasn't hardcore drugs, just a little bit of devil's lettuce, but Japan does not with people smoking the devil's lettuce, so it makes sense. And it was the 60s. Everyone had a little bit of grass in their pocket. Oh wait, no, this was the 80s. Probably should have known better, Paul. And almost every other time he's been arrested was for weed. The dude loved smoking pot. 1972, 73, 1980, and twice in 1985 he got arrested for smoking the devil's lettuce. Good God. I guess he just thought he was so famous he wouldn't get caught, or he didn't care about getting caught, but like, my high school stoner self was way better at hiding weed than Paul McCartney, which seems to be incorrect. Putting weed in the back of the PS2 was the smartest thing I've ever done in my life, though. Chris, put a picture of the original PS2. There's a place to put a hard drive. You could put weed in there and then put the thing back on. No one would know. That was the smartest thing I ever did, and I didn't even find that on the internet. But okay, fine. A little jail time isn't that big of a deal when you're literally the biggest rock star. And drugs, well, they're just part of the fun. Just getting a little high with the boys. But this next one kind of stings, and it's the fact that Paul McCartney sued the Beatles. Come on, Paul. That's like arresting a rainbow for trespassing or charging a puppy for a bowl of water, brother. You are the Beatles. You are Beatle. Beatle is you. I guess the lawsuit was just to dissolve the Beatles' business partnership formally, which makes sense, sure, but also kind of kills the mood, you know? I know it's naive to think that the Beatles didn't care about money. Remember I talked about George Harrison being in a song about tax man? That man was pissed about that. But even so, the idea that this era-defining band that sang about love is just a business entity, it just kind of hurts. I guess all you need is love and a lawyer on retainer. I don't have one of those. Please don't sue me. Moving on down the line of things that Paul McCartney wasn't so chill about, he shared it with Ringo. This dude loved to booze. Big booze bag, Paul McCartney. But he had his rock Linda that would help him through the worst of it. In fact, Linda was so ride or die that on a few occasions she got busted with the bag and she took the fall. Damn. That's love. That's love. I wouldn't expect my girlfriend to do that for me just because she's smart and I'm not that great. Paul really relied on her. In fact, to a point where it almost seemed like he was forcing her into making music with him. She was a photographer by trade, but after the Beatles broke up, Paul taught her a few moves on the piano and they basically said, "You're in the band Wings now." So this is purely my own hot take, but after the Beatles split, Paul and John basically treated their wives like one another. As bandmates and co-writers, they probably needed each other more than they ever would have admitted. And it's very telling that Paul recruited Linda for his post-Beatle records, just like John did with Yoko. Paul would eventually remarry, but it would end up being an especially messy divorce. His ex-wife, Heather Mills, claimed that he would get hammered and push her and throw wine. Though to be clear, there are no criminal charges to these accusations, but I don't know why she would lie about something like that. But I guess that's just the drama you can expect being a millionaire who marries a woman 26 years younger than you. Jesus Christ. But speaking of age differences, you ready? Are you guys ready? I came across a video of a Minneapolis police inspector claiming Paul had an underage girl in his hotel room while on tour in 1965. Not Paul. Not my boy Paul. God damn it. These rumors persist to this day. However, I'm here to clear Paul's name. I know, not the point of this video. I'm dragging literally every Beatle through the mud, but here, just bear with me. I'm not justifying this behavior at all, even though it was super common at the time for these bands. Doesn't make it any better. But at least in this particular instance, it stemmed from a wild scene where the girls were actually the aggressors. I mean, wherever the Beatles were in the 60s turned into a goddamn riot with girls fucking charging the gate. And on this particular night, tons of underage girls had swarmed their hotel room and they were all trying to break in and shit. The cops did find a woman in Paul's hotel room and did identify her as underage, but that was a miscalculation. She was actually 21 years old, so phew, dodged a bullet there. I'm gonna move on from Paul now. We're gonna go to John. And I just said dodged a bullet, and we're talking about John Lennon. I'm just a fucking idiot. At this point, I think we all know that John is a pretty fucked up person. But for decades after his death, he was the most revered member of the Fab Four. There's quite a bit of revisionism in his legacy, and that's in big part due to a fella named Jan Winter, who was the head editor of Rolling Stone magazine. He made sure that everything they published about John Lennon was pristine and crystal clear. Winter became very protective of how Lennon came across in subsequent issues of Rolling Stone and carefully manicured his image in a ton of books and other retrospectives that the magazine would publish. To the point where in the introduction of The Ballad in John of Yoko, which is a book, Winter, whatever his name is, wrote that not only that he was the largest part of the foursome, but also something that could not be contained within the group. That is a very one-sided way to look at John Lennon. And yeah, John Lennon wrote some hard-hitting pieces about peace on Earth or whatever the but nothing hits harder than John Lennon punching his wife in the face. He did that a lot. In an interview with Playboy in 1980, Lennon admitted, "I fought men and I hit women." To his credit, he later became hell-bent on peace because of the way he lived originally. In the same Playboy article, he said, "It is the most violent people who go for peace and love." And I guess that tracks because in his early years, he was completely out of control. When the first wife, Cynthia, gave birth to his child in 1962, John Lennon straight up skipped town. He wasn't on tour or anything, he just wanted to go on vacation to Spain with the Beatles manager. But when local DJ Bob Wooler made fun of Lennon for ditching his wife to go on, quote, a honeymoon, Lennon f***ing snapped. He beat the living daylights out of Wooler with a stick, bruising the dude's ribs. Cynthia was no stranger to Lennon's violence either. She claimed that he got so jealous after seeing her dance with another guy that he smacked her across the face. There's also a rumor that John Lennon got violent with the original bassist of the Beatles named Stuart Sutcliffe. Sutcliffe. According to Stewart's sister, Pauline, Lennon beat him in a fit of rage in May of 1961, and in April of 1962, Sutcliffe died of a brain hemorrhage. Coincidence? Probably, but his sister did not think so. She insisted it wasn't coincidence and that an indent the doctors found in Stewart's skull came from the fight with Lennon. However, for legal reasons, let me be clear. The doctor never claimed a fight was cause of the incident of Stewart's skull indent, and most of the Beatles biographers dispute this story. But allegedly, possibly, John Lennon killed a man, and that's fun. Okay, so some of the accounts of John Lennon's violence are contested, but his bad social behavior is very well documented. This man was a pretty big piece of shit, particularly an 18-month stretch from 1973 to 1975. John and Yoko were having issues, and Yoko suggested that he'd run off with their young personal assistant, May Pang. Yeah, that's a real issue for John Lennon. You say, yeah, you know our little 22-year-old Asian assistant? Go do a bunch of drugs with her for a weekend. I'm not saying you should fetishize Asian women. I'm saying John did, and he was a big fan of that plan, and yes, he did do that. And what followed has become known as, quote, the Lost Weekend, which is way too cute of a name to accurately describe what was going down. Lennon was splitting his time between New York City and LA, getting shit-faced and causing trouble for over 100 weekends. He took up with Ringo and Alice Cooper as part of the Hollywood Vampires, spending tons of nights getting blitzed. And he became especially good friends with singer Harry Nilsson, producing his criminally underrated record Pussycats while tormenting the town. One infamously f***ed up night in terms of them being f***ed up was when they went to go see the comedy act The Smothers Brothers, which I have no clue what that would be. But they showed up to the LA's Troubadour Theater already lit on a concoction of, quote, brandy and milk, which is insane, and proceeded to heckle the comedians by screaming obscenities at them. When they were confronted by the Smothers Brothers manager, a fight broke out. And Lennon, of course, was a big fan of that. He flipped over the fucking table, everyone was throwing jabs, they literally had to throw John Lennon and Nilsson out of the theater where they continued to fight out in the street. And also John Lennon wrote a song called The Woman is the N-Word of the World. And he also said the N-word a bunch of times in that song. How virtue signaling can you be where you fucking that's just so many layers of being a fucking loser. I hate him so much. And he also wrote a Christmas song about being sad about dying kids. You. I don't want to hear that on the radio. Well, it's Christmas, and what have we done? Shut the fuck up. All right, so those are the Beatles. I don't know. What do I have to say about the Beatles to wrap this up? The members of the Beatles survived fame of mythical proportions, and to be honest, I'm kind of impressed it didn't get even darker for them. But our reluctance to talk about the Beatles the way we do other rock bands is one of the most fascinating aspects of their legacy. Bands like the Rolling Stones are famous because we talk about how much excess they went through, like they were f***ing animals. But when the Beatles, we talk about the Beatles, they're little pillars. They're up on their pillars being gods and shit. And I think that's weird. But I don't think it's because we don't know deep down that they're flawed people. I think it's that even when compared to how dark we know each of the members could be, it still isn't as interesting as the massive amounts of love and creativity they poured into their art. And Paul McCartney's the cute one. And I trust him. Look at him. He's so cute. New videos every Saturday and sometimes Wednesday. Like, comment, and subscribe. And check out Extra Tug. $4 a month. You get 6 videos extra from your boy, Big Tug. I'm talking to you directly, answering comments. I'm f***ing dressing up like Satan. I'm talking about dog dicks because I have to put shit over there that I can't talk about on here. And you get your name at the end of the video and you get to support me. Might be worth it. Might want to check it out. I don't know. Talk to you guys later. The mic died in the middle of filming this and I want to kill myself.